Hello and welcome once again to my video blog. So before I get on topic, some little updates. Well, I went to see this surgeon in Montreal called Dr. Ben Simon, who I have been referred to by Dr. Brassard. Dr. Ben Simon specializes in facial feminization surgery, or actually, maybe he doesn't specialize in that, but it's one of the services he offers to trans people. And well, I went for a consultation, and he showed me some before and after pictures, gave me a price estimate. And the good is that the price is cheaper than going with Dr. Zakowski, but from what I've seen of the before and after pictures, there were very few of them. He only had like 3 trans people, and they were all in their 50s or even 60s. So I didn't really feel like I had a really good comparison point. I was a little bit dissatisfied, to be honest. Like, I felt like the nose wasn't really so nicely done. But I would have liked to see more trans people, and maybe some, around my age range or in their 30s, as a better comparison point for myself. Unfortunately, I couldn't. And afterwards I realized, that I didn't see really much nose jobs, but perhaps he had done more nose jobs on genetic girls, and I phoned their office and I asked them, could I have pictures of nose jobs from Dr. Benson by email, and they refused. So the only way I could see those is by going for another $50 appointment. But right now I am pretty much decided. I have pretty much decided that I want to go with Dr. Zakowski for facial feminization, because I feel like he is really right now the world leader in his field. And the price is higher. I'm going to need to borrow some money to do it, but my girlfriend has proposed to lend me that money, and so right now I'm trying to book a date before the end of this summer, hopefully with Dr. Zakowski. I have also decided I probably want to go full-time before going for FFS. I feel like that's probably a smarter choice, to see how comfortable I am being entirely full-time before going for such a major procedure. And so I'm hoping to go full-time like really soon, like in May. But I'm almost there already. I already don't really own much masculine clothing. I already seem to pass pretty much 100% of the time in public, or at least nobody has really called me sir or signaled that he perceived me as male for a long while now. So as my girlfriend put it, going full-time for me is really a small step. It's not major. But anyways, what do I want to talk about today? Well, I've made a couple of videos recently, one of which was about, my situation. I basically came out as a non-op transsexual and revealed or talked a little more about the fact that I don't plan to have SRS anytime in the near future, and that I still view myself as a transsexual. And I got a lot of support for that, but a lot of people seemed to dislike my point of view, and some of them, made some outright offensive comments and even personal attacks. Some of them were saying that I wasn't transsexual, that I was just a transgenderist or even a cross-dresser. Which is kind of offensive, considering that, I did put a lot of effort into my transition, even though I haven't been going really fast at it. I have been on hormones for almost a year now, again, and, I've spent a lot of money on my female wardrobe. I made a lot of steps for this transition, saved a lot of money for my FFS. It's been quite a bit of effort for me, and I don't think I deserve to be, called a cross-dresser or someone who just, goes out dressed on the weekends, because that's really not an accurate portrayal of my situation. And, some other people made comments basically telling me that if I hadn't gone to see a gender therapist, that I wasn't transsexual, because in their mind, to be transsexual, you have to have a diagnosis of GID that's gender identity disorder, from a gender therapist, which is a specialized psychologist specializing in gender issues. So there's 2 ideas in there. That to be a transsexual, you have to want to have a sex change, to have the sex change operation. And to be a transsexual, you have to be diagnosed by a gender therapist. And in my opinion, that is just a wrong idea. If you go on a website like dictionary.com or check a modern dictionary, you will see under transsexual two generally accepted definitions. That a transsexual is either someone of a given physical sex who associates with the opposite gender, feels like he should be a part of the opposite gender. That is, for example, someone who's physically a man and says, I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, or vice versa. Or a transsexual is also someone who has gone through a sex change. But in general, people don't necessarily define transsexual by someone who is planning to have a sex change or someone who necessarily had a sex change, you know. Generally, people accept the idea that if you're transsexual from birth. Maybe you didn't know until recently, but you have always been transsexual. You've always had these ideas that, you know, your physical sex didn't fit with your inner self, basically. And in my opinion, that would be the correct definition of what it is to be a transsexual. You know, because wanting SRS is not something that's common to everybody that transitions. And as I've pointed out in my video about my sex change that I'm not planning to have, there are many female to male transsexuals who do not have the sex change because they don't find it appropriate, you know, because the sex change for female to male transsexual is not very sophisticated. It's very expensive. It can lead to a bunch of complications. So a lot of these people choose not to have it, and we don't say that they're not transsexuals because of that. People understand this. But if someone like me says, well, I'm not really satisfied with the current state of the medical technology in terms of male to female sex changes, not everybody seems to understand that. And I feel like there's a contradiction there. You know, it's not really being fair to male to female transsexual to say something like, you have to want SRS to be a transsexual. Because the truth is, as I have pointed out in my other video, that if I could have female genitalia, the full thing, I would take it now. I would want to have it. I do. It's not like I don't have any issue with having penis, you know. I would rather have the vagina and the internal female genitalia, and I would like to be able to carry a baby and do all these things. I would love to be able to do that, but the current situation is that I can't really get real female genitalia. I can get an imitation, pretty good cosmetic imitation, but I would have to go for surgery, surgery that's pretty painful. That requires me to dilate afterwards. That can have complications. There's a fair percentage of people who can no longer orgasm after this surgery. That is a risk, a pretty big risk. And then it costs, you know, up to $16,000, $18,000. That's quite a bit of money too. So, you know, that people can't understand that some people may not want to do that, you know, I think is unfair. To say that I'm not trans because I don't want to do that, I feel is unfair. And I feel like non-op transsexuals, you know, deserve respect from the rest of the trans community and deserve to be included in the trans community. Because then, you know, otherwise what are we going to do? You know, we're going to play the police here. We're going to see like, oh, you've been pre-op for 6 years now and you still haven't had your SRS. You haven't had it fast enough. You're no longer considered a transsexual. Is that what we're going to do? You know? Because there's a lot of people who stay pre-op for 10 years even because they take a long time to save that money. So what are we going to tell them? You didn't save the money fast enough because you didn't want SRS enough, therefore you're not transsexual? Is that what we're going to tell people? You know, I think that's just wrong. And I think that GID is not defined by your need to have SRS. It's defined by your need to belong to the other gender. And in my opinion, your need to belong to the other gender, my need to be a woman, translates into a need to want to be accepted socially as a woman. And that has nothing to do with having a sex change in my case, because, you know, my penis, I can hide it easily. As I've said before, I already passed pretty much 100%. You know, people don't notice that I have a penis because I know how to hide it. You know, some people have said some pretty stupid things on my video. Someone said that going into a women's bathroom is extremely risky, even from a legal standpoint. Well, I have news for you. I don't think in Canada it's illegal for someone with a penis to go in a woman's bathroom. It's pretty much a social convention that men don't go in a women's bathroom. But I have done it before, and I didn't have any issues. And I'm not really afraid of people opening the door on me and seeing I have a penis. Because I always lock the door, and because if people look at my genitalia when I'm peeing, well, they get what they deserve if they're somehow disappointed, But I know my rights, and honestly, I don't think it's such a huge handicap to be a transsexual who hasn't had the operation in Canada. I can't say that this is true all over the world, but in Canada it is. And now, for the question of the therapist. I personally have seen a gender therapist. I have seen one for 5 months, and the reason I have stopped seeing her is because she didn't seem very competent to me, I wanted to talk to her about GID, but she kept going back to talking about my mother. My mother, which was having some pretty important issues at the time. She had just been prescribed her medication or diagnosed as a schizophrenic at the time, and my gender therapist wanted to talk a lot about that. I didn't want to talk about that so much, but she kept going back to that. And she wanted me to get off the hormones at the time of self-medicating. I did what she said. I went off the hormones at the time, and I felt horrible when I did that. And not only that, she charged me $260 a month, and that was her minimum price. That was her student special. I couldn't go any lower than that. And it was too expensive for me, so I was kind of annoyed. But $260 a month is just, it's not the lowest price out there. There are therapists, gender therapists, that go up to $500 a month. There's one here that my friend wanted to refer me to that was that price. And I was tempted for a while to go with him so I could get a diagnosis from this guy. But I phoned his office several times and I never got a call back from them. His secretary said that they would call me back. They didn't. So I just gave up in the end. I figured I might as well save my money and, not spend on a therapist that's not really going to bring anything useful to me. I also did see some regular therapists. I saw a psychologist for several months that was not specialized in gender identity disorders. And the reason I saw her is to talk about my stress issues. I feel like I'm someone who's easily stressed, and I felt like I had to work on that. And I found her to be really helpful about those things. I've also discussed transition extensively with her, but when it comes to having a diagnosis of GID, here's what I have to say. If you're a trans person, in the end, you're going to have to decide yourself whether you want to transition or not. Whoever you want to go see, they're not going to make the decision for you. And generally what gender therapists do basically is they see if you stick with it long enough to deserve to be approved for SRS, But besides counseling, they don't make the decision for you, and few of them will really give you a diagnosis per se. The ones that I went to see did not give such a diagnosis. And as I've said to someone in one of the comments, in the end, whether you want to transition or not is your decision. If you're going to see a therapist in the hope that they will decide of whether or not you should transition for you, then I think that's a bad thing. You should be doing introspection. You should be looking inside of yourself and seeing whether that's really what you need or not to be happy. You shouldn't really count on someone else to make that decision. That being said, if I had a good gender therapist available to me who didn't cost a fortune, many hundreds of dollars per month, I would be interested. But so far I've been pretty comfortable during my transition. I felt like taking female hormones did a world of good to me. And I feel like just the fact that I enjoy being female in public and taking hormones, and that the more I feminize physically and socially, the happier I seem to be, is a pretty good indication to me that I am transsexual. Because I've been going through the real life test for a while now. And that's the most important test in my opinion. But anyway, some people probably won't agree with me. Some people do think that a diagnosis from a therapist is the most important thing in the world. But I would say that there are a lot of transsexuals out there who are not doing that. I personally know several transsexuals who did not ever see a gender therapist, who have not been prescribed hormones even by an endocrinologist in some cases, who have been self-medicating, and I know that 2 of those that went post-op, that are post-op now since over a year, and they are doing very well. They are extremely well socially integrated, they have good jobs, they are doing nicely in life, they are happy, and these people seem to be extremely well. On the other hand, I have seen some transsexuals who did go with gender therapists, and no offense to these people, but some of these people are total wrecks. There are some transsexuals out there who, in my opinion, were just not ready to transition. We're not ready to get the operation. We're not ready to do this. But they have been approved by therapists anyways. They went through it, and now they are not socially integrated at all. They live like hermits. They have no job and no friends. And these people don't have no job and no friends because they don't have no job because they've been losing their career because their employer found out that they were trans. I'm talking here about people who don't have jobs because they're not looking for a job, because having a job would mean interacting with people, and that's scary. In my opinion, these kinds of people shouldn't be allowed to transition until they have dealt with their core psychological issues, which are clearly not just gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria. So that's what I have to say about, therapists. You might think that going to a gender therapist is the proper way to do things, and I would say you might think that even seeing a gender therapist can't hurt, but that's not even true. There are good therapists out there, and there are bad therapists too. There are some people who are not good counselors and who will not help you taking the good decisions and learning more about yourself and understanding yourself better. To see a gender therapist, you have to find a good one. That it's not always easy to tell who's a good and a bad therapist. You have to be able to afford it. But in the end, I would say that the most important part of transition and finding out whether it's right for you is introspection. Looking inside of yourself, and doing that huge part of the work by yourself. And a therapist can help you do that, but in the end, it's something you have to do by yourself. And you have to deal with your other psychological issues as well, in my opinion. Personally, I have spent some time dealing with my stress issues, and I feel like I'm much better able to deal with them now, but I felt like that was something that I had to deal with, prior to going full-time. I feel like, anxiety issues are something that are part of me that is maybe related to my GID. Transition is stressful. Repressing my feelings for years has been causing me a lot of stress, but I feel like it's something that I need to deal with in order to be happier. That's the goal of transition in the end, probably being happier. And as far as therapists, you might think that going to see a therapist and getting a gender identity disorder diagnosis is the acid test of transsexuality, and that you're an approved transsexual after that. But I'm just gonna say that's wrong. It's very easy to see a therapist and get approved for SRS if you have money and you stick with it. It's very easy to act transsexual. It's very easy to fake being transsexual in a sense. I don't think therapists in general are really able to tell who's trans and who's not. In some cases they can, but not in all cases. If anyone is a semi-good actor and can repeat a few cliches, ooh, I feel like I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. I hate my genitalia. I want to cut it off. I always played with girls' toys when I was a kid. Anybody can repeat those things. Anybody who's a semi-good actor can fake being trans and be approved by a gender therapist, In the end, gender therapists are not really there to test whether you're trans or not. They're there to guide you through the transition and to help you understand yourself. But if you're not honest with yourself to begin with, then they're not really going to be able to help you. They're just going to give you what you want. If it's SRS that you want, they'll give it to you. They'll approve you for it, provided you pay them for long enough, They'll give you your paper if that's what you want. Anyways, you don't believe me that anybody that's a good actor can fake being transsexual in a convincing way? Well, have you ever seen this movie called Trans America? Well, if you didn't know, the main actor in that movie is Felicity Huffman. She's a very good actor, and she portrays being a transsexual, in my opinion, in an extremely convincing way. She even has the voice she even fakes the voice, of many transsexuals in a way that's very accurate, and the attitude, and she's got everything right. So I would say that that's pretty much a good proof. She's a genetic woman, and she can make a convincing transsexual that would probably make a gender therapist, convinced and approve her for SRS in the real world. So that's what I had to say for today. I don't think that you have to have a diagnosis to be a transsexual. I think that being transsexual is something that's part of you. Transsexuality has some similarities with homosexuality, and it's the same thing for this. Like, to be homosexual, you don't need a diagnosis from a therapist. It's something that you are from birth. Well, it's the same thing for being transsexual. It's something that you are from birth. And perhaps you can get a diagnosis from a good therapist. And perhaps that's a good thing if your therapist is indeed a good therapist. But in the end, what you are inside yourself is something that only you can know for sure. And that's the end of my video blog for today. I hope you appreciated it. And if you have any comments, you can feel free to post comments. But please, no hostile comments, no insulting comments. If you post insulting comments, I will block you. And I don't want you to start a flame war. But anyways, if you have things to say too, feel free to make a video response. Feel free to state your opinion in a little bit more concise way in a video response. And if I think that your arguments make any kind of sense, then I will approve your video response, and other people will be able to see it when they watch this video in the future. Okay, so that's all for today, people. Bye bye.